Alrighty, hello everyone. So good to see you all virtually, and I know you might be watching the recording of this. So hi, if you're recording, like watching the recording. Before we get into our speaker, if you don't know me, I'm Matt Garrett. I'm the director of student programming here at Sinai City. And if you know anything about me, I love repping my hometown. It's one of my favorite things to rep the city of Detroit and just kind of represent everything that goes along with that. And alongside that, especially with it being Indigenous Peoples Day yesterday, it's also really important to recognize that New Haven, where we would be if we were in person, is also a place where others call home as well. So with that, I want to just do a quick land acknowledgement to just recognize that. So with that, we acknowledge that Indigenous peoples and nations, including Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scotticoke, Golden Hill Bagusset, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac and other Algonquian-speaking peoples have stewarded through generations the lands and waterways of what is now the state of Connecticut. We honor and represent the enduring relationship that exists between these peoples and nations and this land. Now, alongside with that, especially being part of, we're trying to make this one of the most inclusive environments, learning environments like around. So if at any time, if I could be helpful to help, make this a really make you feel like you belong here, or if maybe you don't feel like you belong, feel free to reach out to me at any time, during the event, after the event, or really anyone at Size City. We want to make sure that you feel like you have a place here at Size City, in person and virtually. So with that, I'd love to introduce our speaker tonight, who's going to be talking about personal branding and sports. And our speaker tonight is Malcolm Levins, who is a former pro athlete. He's an author and he's an entrepreneur, and he just recently wrote a new book called Impact Beyond the Game: How Athletes Can Build Influence, Monetize their Brand, and Create a Legacy. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Malcolm to just share all of his wisdom and experiences.
Thanks, Matt, for that incredible introduction. Didn't know you were from Detroit either. That's where my family's from, so we got one thing in common. But nonetheless, appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate you guys being here as well. And I'll go ahead and just share my screen. Let me know if you guys can see this. Can you guys see this okay?
Yep, we can see it.
All right. So obviously, as Matt said, we'll be talking about personal branding and social media in particular for the modern day athlete. I think everybody's kind of familiar with the NIL rule changes and how that's kind of revolutionizing college sports and the way student athletes are able to use their platforms and essentially make money and create legacies and opportunities for themselves outside of their sport. So without further ado, we'll dive right into it. But first, I'll kind of give you a little background about me and why I even feel qualified to speak about this topic. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., played basketball, highly competitive WCAC conference in D.C., which is one of the top Catholic leagues in the country, played with and against a lot of guys who are playing in the NBA and even the NFL right now, and then went on to play in college at Niagara University and Cal State San Marcos. After that, I played 2 years of professional basketball over in Japan, transitioned out of the game in 2017 when I published my first book called Lessons from the Game, which essentially just talked about my story as an athlete, some of the key lessons that I took away from playing sports throughout my life. Went on to write another book, as Matt said, called Impact Beyond the Game, which was really focused on teaching athletes how to leverage their platforms, build their brand on social media, and create opportunities to make money. In the midst of also making that transition, I started a podcast where I interviewed over 100 current and former athletes on everything from life after sports, branding, business, mental health, etc. And I've also written for and been featured in publications such as the Huffington Post, Forbes, and Culture Hub. So been in the athlete business space since I've retired from being a professional athlete. And a large part of that has been talking about athlete branding and showing athletes how to utilize their platforms and their influence more effectively. And so, diving right into, personal branding, what a personal brand is. I think a lot of times people think about personal branding, they think about graphics, logos, designs. And while the visual element is a big part of what makes your brand a brand, a personal brand is essentially what people feel and think about you when they come into contact with you or your name. So everything you do on social media, everything you post, everything you say in person. All of these different things impact the perception that people have. They evoke some type of emotion or feeling that people have about you, whether that's negative or positive. So I think when you just think about the essence of personal branding, it's just about associating your name with the idea of what it means to be in a certain space or a certain industry and the feeling that people get about that. So it's not so much about the logos and the designs and all these different things that people talk about when it comes to branding. It's just about that feeling that you emote, that is evoked when people hear or think about you. So you really have to look at it in that context and understand that branding is nothing more than just that at the essence of it all. And to dive a little bit deeper into why this is important for athletes in particular, and even more so now with NIL for student athletes, is because when athletes actively build their brand, when they post content, when they tell their story, and we'll be diving into all those different topics later on. But when you do these things and you take a more proactive approach to building your platforms and leveraging that attention that you have as an athlete, you get more money, you get more headlines, you get more opportunities, all that attention that you're able to really gain from building your brand. It just creates more options for you outside of the game, which in turn helps you in life after sports, which is something that we all know a lot of athletes struggle with. So I think when you think about it like that, it's critical to your career, your success as an athlete, and even being, a former athlete as well, to build your personal brand. It's also the number one way you can differentiate yourself from other athletes who are, playing your sport, who might be on the same, plane as you. So, those are the main reason. It also helps you have a better understanding of who you are outside of your jersey, because a lot of times athletes suffer from athletic identity where, we just see ourselves as just being athletes. We don't see ourselves as doing more than just that. And we're stuck in this box, whereas you're able to explore your other passions and interests and things that you want to do outside of your sport. That in turn helps you build your brand, but also helps you see who you're going to be in the future, and doesn't limit you to what you can do on the court or on the field. So this is why it's so crucial for athletes to really, take a proactive approach and step towards figuring out their interests, their skills, their values, their beliefs outside of just, what they do every day as an athlete. And in the meantime, if you guys have any questions during this, you can try to pop it in the chat, or I don't know if Matt wants to, filter any questions that you have during that I can answer, but I'll try to take a look and answer any questions that may come across. And, this is a quote that I think I had put in one publication about why transparency and authenticity is so important, and really the cornerstones to building any strong personal brand. You really have to have utter and complete conviction in your fears and insecurities. Transparency and authenticity are the cornerstones of any strong personal brand. And what I really mean by this is being able to expose yourself in the most vulnerable ways that you feel comfortable doing. I think when you think about the strongest brands, especially personal brands, they are the most open people. They are the most honest people. They're the most just truthful about their failures, their losses, everything that they've been through. They're open about it, and they're truthful and they're honest with their audience. So I think that when you want to build a strong brand, you have to be able to be vulnerable and authentic with your audience. And so I thought this quote was really relevant to athletes who might be scared to post or scared to share certain things, when, by doing that, that's going to make you even more appealing and attractive to an audience and really help elevate your brand to that next level. So don't be afraid to post and to share, even the bad things that you go through in life, because we're all human at the end of the day. All right, so what might be a little more relevant to you guys is how to start building your personal brand. So I've listed, I think, about 5 strategies or tips that I have that I think are most important when it comes to athletes building their personal brands. The first is to define and tell your story. We all have a story to tell. Going back to that last quote, we all been through losses. We all been through failures. We've all had things that, we've been through that makes us who we are. And so you have to really analyze your story, what makes your story different from other people, other athletes who might play your sport, who might, be your teammate, and why people should even pay attention to that or want to hear your story over someone else's. So what obstacles or experiences have you been through, and how your story, your background can provide value? Because that's really what this is about, is providing value to someone else who might experience the same things that you have gone through, or will experience that in the future. And so understanding your story, understanding some of your talents, your skills outside of being an athlete, I think is really important to defining your brand. And even going further than that is your brand positioning statement. And so I wrote about this in length and impact beyond the game, but essentially, what your brand positioning statement is, it equals your differentiation in your plus your frame of reference. So an example that I use often is Russell Westbrook, and who plays for the Lakers now. He's a former MVP who's also a fashion icon. What a big part of what makes his personal brand so strong is the people taking pictures of the clothing that he wears before the games in the tunnel, and that is kind of carved out a niche and kind of what makes him interesting outside of just being an NBA player. Is his fashion sense and the type of clothes he wears, and some of the comments that people have about it. Some people think it's wild and it's just crazy, some of the stuff that he wears, but other people love it. And so that's what you really want. You want to make people make a decision about how they feel about you. You want it to either be extremely positive or extremely negative. You don't want to be in between or indifferent, because when you're indifferent as a brand, you get forgotten. So you want to have a really strong positioning and something that makes you really extremely different and unique, but also have a frame of reference, something that people know you by. And putting those two things together will give you your brand positioning statement and help you kind of differentiate yourself in the marketplace as well. In between, some of the strategies that I'll be talking about, I also have some athlete brand examples. And, these are athletes who I think have been able to build some of the strongest personal brands outside of their sport. And I think LeBron James is probably the pinnacle, in my opinion, for athletes who, have been able to leverage their platform effectively and build businesses, have endorsement deals, and done a lot of different things. So, I mean, you can see his resume here. It's incredible, out to 20-year NBA player, but he's also founded companies, Spring Hill Company, Robot Company, Uninterrupted, which is a major platform for other athletes. He started the I Promise School, has several different, endorsement deals with some of the biggest companies in the world. Also owns, several Blaze pizza franchises, and he's a minority owner in Liverpool and the Boston Red Sox. So, I mean, it kind of speaks for itself, but what he's been able to do is incredible. And he's, not even done, building his brand and being who he is as an athlete. I think he's just like I said, the pinnacle of a, athlete who's been able to really leverage their platform in the most effective way possible. Looking at social media, I mean, obviously social media is everything in this day and age, and it's revolutionized the way that we connect, how, we interact with one another. But at the same time, there's dozens of platforms that you can utilize to build your personal brand. In my opinion, I think the best strategy is to really hone in and focus on maybe one or two platforms that you can master, because it's too time consuming to try to be a jack of all trades, and you'll end up spreading yourself too thin if you're trying to be on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and posting content, on all these different platforms, trying to build an audience, trying to, gain, some traction. And so I always tell athletes, if you're starting from ground zero, if you're really figuring out how to best leverage your platform and start building a, following an audience, figure out what platforms work best for you, or which platforms that you like the most. If you like, to post a lot of pictures, Instagram might be best. If you feel most comfortable posting videos, then TikTok is, their organic reach is undefeated right now. So I think that would be the best platform. Twitter, if you'd like to, you don't like to be in front of the camera as much, Twitter will be great, and it's very conversational. So you have to really figure out what platform you're able to, put the most effort and attention on, and learn everything you can about that platform to create content and show, what you're interested in, and to be able to tell your story. And in the same vein, being very contextual on the platform that you're using. And so what I mean by that is that, the way that we operate on LinkedIn is going to be vastly different from, the person that you are on Instagram. So you have to think about your audience and how they're going to be viewing your content on any particular platform. because the psychology is not going to be the same. LinkedIn is obviously a more professional and business context, where TikTok is more, free flowing, fun, dancing, et cetera, et cetera. So understanding how, the context that of which you're posting content on any particular platform is going to be extremely important when you're trying to gain a following, and build an audience. So understanding that, I think, is really crucial as well, not just repurposing content on every single platform with the same, context or the same, copy is not going to work on every single platform. So you really have to understand the nuances of how people are thinking when they're on LinkedIn, as opposed to TikTok, as opposed to Pinterest, as opposed to Twitter, because they're all different, but they're all great opportunities to build your platform. You just got to figure out what's best for you. Looking at the next athlete brand example, I think Serena Williams is probably one of the most underrated business-minded athletes, in my opinion. A lot of people don't know that she's a co-owner, along with her sister Venus, of the Miami Dolphins. She's also opened up a community center in their hometown of Compton, and she has several endorsement deals, just like LeBron James. And she's also a venture capitalist. She has her own venture firm and is an investor in a highly successful company called SurveyMonkey, but I think she's also invested in several other tech companies. So she has a vast portfolio of business ventures that she's participated in. And I frankly don't think she gets enough credit for what she's been able to build and do in the business world, and how she's kind of leveraged her brand as a tennis player to have other options outside of the game. The next strategy, or the next tip I have, is to just be consistent. I think like I said before, we all know content is king, and there's only 3 ways that you can kind of communicate your story or your message. And that's only through video, audio, or written word. And so, as we talked about before with utilizing these platforms, you have to really figure out which method of communication you're best at. If you like, you're more introverted, then writing might be the best for you. That's how I was when I was kind of figuring out how to build my brand outside of basketball. When I was transitioning, I was trying to figure out how I could best put out content. And so I started with writing, because that was the thing that came most naturally to me. It just felt, like I could just write for days, and it wasn't as draining for me as, getting on a video. And so I started with writing, but transitioned into audio, doing podcasts, which obviously is another great way of, putting out content. So you really have to figure out, what you're best at, what feels most natural and comfortable for you. And whatever that medium is going to be, you have to be frequent and you have to be consistent with that. And so what I mean by that is not necessarily saying, a lot of you guys are probably student athletes, but you have busy schedules. And so I'm not saying you have to create a content calendar or, post every single day, but figure out where the line is, where you can be consistent with the content that you're putting out and the story that you're telling. You really just want to have a strong purpose behind your content and have it be, some type of symmetry to it. You don't want it just to be random. One day you're posting pictures of food, the next day you're posting, I don't know, something else, your dog or whatever. So you want it to have some type of cohesiveness to your content, and really, be consistent with that particular content, whether it's going to be the written word, audio, or video. I think that's important when you're looking at how to really build a sustainable audience and get people to understand what you want to be known for. So figuring out what you're best at, what's most natural and comfortable for you. And then if you want to move on and say you start doing video, you can also repurpose that to audio and written content as well. So I think video is paramount in this day and age, but it's not, you don't have to do it necessarily. You just have to figure out, what is the best way for you to start, and then figuring out how, or if you want to move on to doing other avenues of creating content and putting your message out there. The next athlete brand example I have is Alex Rodriguez. I think he's probably one of the most successful athletes who have transitioned into business. I think, a lot of, what he's done is kind of set the stage for other athletes to transition into business and to build, large portfolios. And he's done everything from commercial real estate to esports, building gyms. He's involved in several different, investments as well, as far as tech goes, creating content networks. So all different types of things. He's also sports team owner as well. So I think, you know, when you look at athletes and how they transition and some of the steps that they've taken to do so effectively, he's kind of one of the you know, best that I've seen in recent years, kind of build, you know, leverage his brand as a you know, former baseball player, but also create a really, really successful business career and life after sports. So I think he's a great example of, you know, athletes who have built a strong brand. Next strategy I have is engaging and building relationships. I think this is, you know, one of the most understated parts of building a personal brand. Is really about the people and the relationships that you build. And I tell people all the time, you know, one of the questions I used to get when I used to do speaking and presentations is, you know, what is one thing that I wish I would have did differently, and when I was in college or even being a pro. And I would say I would have built more relationships with people who weren't athletes. I would have reached out and, you know, expanded my network, and, you know, being, you know, in the cafeteria, sit with people who, you know, weren't athletes and try to establish those relationships, because you never know who you might meet that you can help, or vice versa, who can help you in the future. So whether it's cold calling or cold emailing, I think it's important to reach out to people who you aspire to be like, or you want to just learn from. So I think, you know, not being afraid to do that can be very, very powerful. People respect that, especially when you have something to bring to the table and value that you want to provide, even though you may not feel like you have much. I think just offering to help somebody, or offering to just, you know, be there to support them, I think is really important. And it allows you to collaborate with like-minded people as well and share ideas. And so I think, you know, that is one of the biggest things that athletes can gain from building their brands, is just the relationships and the people that you'll meet through your audience. So I know it's tough with COVID now to kind of get that face-to-face connection. But in the same instance, you know, hopefully once we kind of navigate out of this situation, it's important to get comfortable meeting people face-to-face. And so, you know, whatever regard, do everything you can to get people to know you offline intimately. You really want to build a strong relationship with people, and really expand your network to where it's not just athletes or people that you're used to talking to. You really just, it's about being uncomfortable, and start reaching out to people who are in the industries that you potentially want to work in, whether that's technology or even staying in the sports industry. I think it's really important for athletes to start thinking about life after sports sooner rather than later, and putting themselves in a position to build relationships with people who may not even be at the top. They may be, you know, a step ahead of you, but those relationships are going to be valuable, because you never know who's going where, or you know, how that relationship might turn out in the future. So connecting with your audience, connecting with the followers, I think is really important, and probably another key to really building a strong personal brand, and getting people to understand who you are and what you're about outside of, you know, just being an athlete. The next athlete brand example is Cristiano Ronaldo. I think a lot of people are familiar with him. He's probably, I believe, the most followed athlete on the planet on Instagram. So he's able to charge, you know, more than $400,000 per IG post if he's partnering with a brand. He also has major endorsement deals: Nike, Herbalife, EA Sports, American Tourister. And he also has his own company called CR7, and they do everything from restaurants, underwear, shoes, fragrances. I mean, you name it, he's done it. And so I think when you talk about international athletes, he's probably the pinnacle, you know, in Europe, and really build a really, really strong personal brand, and has done a lot of incredible things outside of soccer. The last strategy I have is just realizing that brands take time. A lot of people, you know, want to build a strong personal brand and have 1 million followers and have all these different brand deals, but none of that happens overnight. It takes years and years of consistency. You know, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of figuring it out. It just takes time, and I think this graphic is a really good representation of you know, how much work is put into doing anything. I mean, you don't become a great athlete overnight. That takes years and years of sacrifice, discipline, putting in the work when no one else is putting in the work, and just doing the things that other people aren't willing to do. So you have to take that athlete mindset and that same approach, you know, to building your brand, if that's what you want. You know, you think about some of the most, you know, biggest companies or biggest brands in the world. I think about, you know, people like The Rock or Oprah Winfrey, or, you know, a lot of people talk about Steve Jobs, and, you know, he's passed away years ago, but he's still a brand that people talk about to this day. But these are people who, you know, it took them years of failures, of, you know, iterations and pivoting to be the brands that they are today. And so understanding that and playing the long-term game, having that mindset, I think is really, really important. And knowing that, you know, even though you're an athlete now, your brand might pivot when you retire. And so being able to kind of, you know, roll with the punches, so to speak, and being able to adjust and pivot is really important. You will make mistakes through this process. But going back to that quote before about owning your insecurities, owning your failures, owning evolving as a human being is really important. And the longer you play the game, the more opportunities you will have. You know, a lot of people you'll see a lot of people quit. You'll see a lot of people kind of fall by the wayside because they don't want to put in the work. But the longer you're able to play the game, put in that work and do everything that's listed on this graphic, the more opportunities and choices that you will have in the long run. And the stronger your brand will be. So it's just about being able to just endure the hard times, endure the ups and downs of building a strong brand and being consistent as possible, just with your process. So trusting that, you know, as long as you're doing the right things, staying true to yourself, being authentic, your brand will be successful and you will have the opportunities that you seek. The last athlete brand example that I have for you guys is Russell Wilson, quarterback for the Seahawks. He's the founder of a company called Goodman Brand, also has several endorsement deals and is involved in mobile gaming. And he launched the Why Not You Foundation recently with a mission of motivating and empowering today's youth. So I think he's another athlete who probably doesn't get as much recognition. I think when you think about football, Tom Brady is probably the pinnacle or the most talked about athlete. But I think Russell Wilson is really unique in what he's been able to do outside of, you know, being a quarterback, and how he's built his brand outside of sports. So, and just to kind of recap everything that we've gone over, first thing being defining and telling your story. Everybody has a story. Everybody has been through different experiences, has unique backgrounds. You really have to understand why yours is different, why yours is unique, and furthermore, how you can provide value using your story and your experiences to other people, to your audience, and being able to communicate that effectively. You know, diving into social media, we talked about picking a platform and mastering it. So don't try to be a jack of all trades or, you know, post content on every single platform because you're going to drain yourself and it's not sustainable. Really pick maybe one, I'd say two at the max, and try to focus on learning the ins and outs, the nuances, observing other creators, other brand builders on those platforms, seeing what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, what you can do differently, and try to master that platform, that one or two platform. Creating consistent content. Content is everything in today's world. You know, how consistent you're going to be is going to determine how many opportunities that you have, you know, later down the line. So being consistent, providing value, you know, and posting, you know, semi-regularly, I think is really important to get people to trust your brand, to, you know, relate to you and to understand who you are and what you're about. The next is engaging and building sustainable relationships. So constantly looking for opportunities to collaborate with other creators, other athletes, other people who might be in your lane, might not be in your lane, but really kind of, you know, reading between the lines and seeing what opportunities are there to build those relationships, to expand your network, to meet new people, and really try to see how you can always be looking to provide value to others as opposed to you getting something from them. I think that's really, really key to, you know, building a strong network in life after sports. And then lastly, playing the long-term game. Branding is about legacy. It's about, it's done in perpetuity. So you don't build a brand one day and then the next day you can kind of hang it up. It's something that you do for the rest of your life. Understanding how, people's perception of you does matter. At the end of the day, your reputation is everything. And so play the long game, and if you do the right things day in and day out, stay consistent with it, and being able to pivot, whether that's, going from one industry to another, or being an athlete and being a former athlete, I think is really crucial and important. So with that being said, once again, I appreciate the opportunity, you guys, and definitely open to taking any questions or comments.
Welcome. This has been really amazing. I know I learned a lot through this already. And I feel like you've been in office hours with me too for a lot of this feedback. So I feel like it's been common conversations recently. So thanks for sharing all this. I guess first question, Yuting, I see your hand raised. Do you want to ask a question?
Oh, yes. Yeah. First, I want to say, thank you. Yeah. Today, your presentation is so solid. Yeah. And I say it is, I feel sad that I thought this event should be in person. So I'm in the Thai city now. Yeah. Yeah. If you could see my background. But then when I came to Thai city, I feel so sweet, so weird that nobody here. And then I realized this is an online event. Okay. So yeah, so first, yeah, thank you again for this very, very solid presentation. And actually, I'm also, I'm not an athlete, but I'm also an influencer on some social platforms. But all of the social platforms are in China. Now I have about 70,000 followers on the you could name it as a Chinese Twitter, and I also have about 5,000 follower on the Chinese Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also I'm the contractor influencer for the Ctrip, which is how to say, an app for the travel, the booking tickets, travel tickets. Yeah, and yes, and also a contractor influencer for the WeChat. So I totally understand your 5 points. Yeah, I totally understand. So I have several questions. The first question, we know exactly, and you also talk about several times, that it is real time consuming, and it's I think, yeah, it's a heavy operation needed. So I'm just a question, wondering, you do the operation by yourself, or you have outsourced it, or you have other people help you to reply the fans comments or publish something? Sometimes you need to fine tune the pictures. It's really, really troubling.
Right. Yeah, so for me, me personally, I don't have nearly as many followers as you, but I think for
because
anyone,
Chinese have more people. That's the only
that is true. It's hard work. It's hard work. It really is, and I think there comes to a certain point where it's not even sustainable for you to answer or even feasible for you to answer every comment, every direct message that you might receive. And so you might have to outsource some of that work, whether that's finding like an assistant that you can pay part-time. But, I think if it's manageable, to a certain point, I would try to respond to as many comments myself, because it creates that relationship, that deepened relationship with your audience. And people value your response because it's you taking time out of your day to respond to a comment. And so I look at it as like, if I'm walking down the street and someone says something to me and I just keep walking past them, that'd be kind of rude, right? As opposed to you taking the time out of your day to respond to someone who might have left a comment on your post, that might mean the world to them. So I would say, if you're capable of doing it, I would do it. I would put in the work and respond to every comment or every direct message if it's possible. If not, you can start to kind of outsource some of that and manage that with your assistant or whoever the person is going to be that's going to be helping you out with kind of managing your responses and some of the posts that people might have for your pictures or whatever, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. So the next question is also about it. So you talk about video, and I know exactly that video is the trend, and some platforms, they have some supporting on the video. but we have to acknowledge that video is much more time consuming than just the writing. So how often or the frequency that you would video, or you do it by yourself, or other people would think about maybe the editing and you just show up? I'm also curious about the time management.
Yeah. So, I mean, me personally, I don't post too much video content, but for a lot of people who do, it really is about what works best for you. I know some people on YouTube might post one video per week, and that works for their platform, for their audience, and what they expect. I would say whatever you're doing, whether that's on TikTok or YouTube, is finding a cadence that you can be consistent with. So there is going to be posting every Monday or Friday or every Wednesday. Finding that schedule and just being as consistent as possible, because what people are going to do is they're going to come to expect you to post on that day. And so you really just want to be as consistent as possible with whatever cadence that you have with your posting.
Okay.
So if you can do every single day, that'd be perfect. But you know, like you said, it's time consuming. It's a lot of effort. It's draining. So a lot of people don't post videos every day, but if you do a couple times a week and that works for you, it's just finding, you know, what level of frequency and consistency that you can abide by, that you can stick to over a sustained period of time without burning yourself out.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. So my third question is that you talk about understanding the particular content, understand that the audience in different platforms are different. Yeah, I also know it. But the question is also, for example, the TikTok, it's basically by algorithm and recommendation by the tag or the different groups. But however, for example, the Twitter, it's just by the forward. Yeah, if I forward it by some famous people, my traffic would increase very soon. So the question is that how, I think this question, it's how to say, so I know it, but I don't know how to do it. It's time consuming. It's maybe need to be discussed the case by case. Yeah, just as I said, that one is by algorithm, by tags, but the Twitter is basically by forwarded by other people, by the comments, the engagement. So how would you put, or how would you write different things on different platforms in a efficient way?
So are you speaking about Twitter in particular? So how do you, I guess, what's your objective? Is it to build a bigger following on Twitter?
This is one thing, but I also do other platforms. And so my question is that on the one time, I want to do it in several platforms. Yeah, because not only I have followers on it, but also I'm the contractor influencer, so I need to publish things on time. And this is one thing. The second thing is that I know exactly the targeted audience are different, but I don't know how to publish different things on different platforms, because it's really time consuming, and it needs some more strategic thinking on it. So sometimes I'm lazy. I just publish the same content on all of the platforms. So I mean, I know the logic, I know the method, but I just don't know how to do it efficiently.
Do you plan out your content? Like, is there a day where you just sit down and you just focus on planning out what content is going to go, which platform? Have you ever tried doing that? So maybe taking like Sunday and because I did say in the presentation, like maybe some of you guys don't have the time to create like a content calendar, but a lot of social media managers, people who work specifically in the social media space, have calendars that they create where it shows like, okay, on Monday,
what happened?
It's going to look like this. So having creating a calendar or a schedule to where you can like create your content in advance really helps with you planning out the week, so that you know what's going to be posted on which day, what that content looked like, what photo or picture, what the copy is going to say. And I know that this is a lot of work, but if you're trying to, you know, post on these different platforms and it's you know, this is your responsibility.
Mhm,
It's beneficial for you to kind of create that beforehand, where it's not, you know, Monday comes around and you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I
mhm,
post on you know, Twitter today? What do I post on Instagram? And then you know, you're overwhelmed and you just end up posting the same things. And going back to psychology, like the copy that works on Twitter is not going to be the same that works on Instagram. It's just not how the platforms work. So I think planning in advance, your content, maybe picking one day out of the week where you can just get a calendar together and put all your copy and your content together on that day, and knowing what you're going to post, so it's not, the day doesn't come around, you're not overwhelmed, might be helpful.
Okay, okay, thank you. I hope not waste you and other students too much time, but I have last question.
Sure.
So first you talk about we really have the strong position, not in the middle. I know it's true, but the point is that if I'm too strong on one personality, sometimes, or maybe not sometimes, but happens 1 or 2 times that I'm attacked by thousands of people. Yeah, thousands of people criticized me in the comments. So I have to say that my traffic increased, and my fans also, my followers also increased. But I just feel sad and that's attacked by so many people. So yeah, I know that have a strong position is good, but how to, yeah, just as I said, if you sometimes you're too strong, you may be criticized by other people.
Well, if you believe in it, then, you know, you got to kind of be willing. I'm always, you know, a believer in dying on your sword. So if it's something that you truly stand for and you believe in, then no one else's opinion about that should matter at the end of the day. And I know that's much easier said than done, especially when you have a big following and thousands of people can comment and criticize and say negative things about you. And it takes, you know, you have to have really thick skin. And you know, it's not hard being a content creator or a strong personal brand. If that was the case, everybody would do it. But if it's something that you truly stand for and believe in, and you know that's right in your heart, you know, that's what it is. And sometimes you just have to tune out the negativity, because some people just don't get it, and they're keyboard warriors. They're on the other side and they're not posting their thoughts, their opinions, their perspectives. They're sitting there criticizing you. And so in actuality, you should be feeling bad for them, because you know, if people are spending their time being negative or saying hateful things to other people, you know, that's sad, you know. And so at the end of the day, you're
Great.
doing the right thing by standing for something you believe in. And it takes a lot of courage and strength to do that. So I would say keep doing what you're doing.
Okay, thank you, thank you so much. Yeah, your presentation and your answers are so good. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, hope to see you in person.
We'll have to set it up. We got to talk to Matt about it.
Okay. Yeah, the life of influencer are very hard.
I know it is. Like I said, everybody will be doing it if it was easy. So
okay, thank you.
That's very good questions you take. And then Malcolm, we also have some questions in the chat from Kevin.
okay.
Yeah, the first question is there a case for paying for ads on social media, example, Instagram, to build your brand?
I mean, it depends what your objective is. I think you really have to have kind of a metric for what you're trying to gain from posting ads. Are you selling something? Is it to build brand awareness? So it's tough on Instagram, because kind of the algorithms have changed, the organic reach has changed. So it's harder to kind of gain traction, to build a following. But I would, before spending money, I would really be clear on what I'm trying to gain from doing so. You know, because running ads is it might not give you the return that you're hoping for. It can just leave you into, you know, in disappointment. So there is a case, but it depends on what you're trying to get from at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then the second question is, how do you get traction on social media? Is it just hashtags? I feel like it's a loaded question. You could probably write a novel on.
It's really 3 things. It comes down to consistency, which I've talked about at length, value, and patience. I think a lot of people aren't willing to put in the amount of work that it takes to build something sustainable on any social media platform, because you have to put in the work. You have to think about it from your audience or your viewers' point of view. Why would I want to follow this person? What are they contributing to my life? Are they funny? Are they entertaining? Are they educating me about something that is going to help me improve my life? So what type of value are you providing on a consistent basis? And then being able to do that over a long period of time is how you really build on any social media platform.
All right. And then the last question is, or the last question from Kevin, at least in the chat right now, is thoughts on how you make something viral?
I wouldn't even look for virality. I mean, people go viral and then tomorrow they're back to, where they were. They may get a couple of followers, but you really want to focus on playing that long-term game, because that's what's going to be sustaining you, when there is a new social media platform. If you can build a brand on, say, this was 5 years ago and you started building your brand on Instagram, and now you have 1 million followers that trust in you, that believe in you, that know who you are. And then TikTok comes out and it's like, oh, everybody's migrating to TikTok. All you got to do is set up a TikTok account. Those people who have been with you since the beginning, because they know who you are going to follow you no matter where you go, even to an email list, or say you want to set up a text messaging, SMS marketing platform. You have your own text community, like whatever you want to do. If you're building for sustainability and for the long term, you want to have your audience always coming with you, because that's how you always have opportunities in the future. No matter what algorithm changes, no matter where people go, people know you. When you just look to go viral, that's a quick, short-term metric. Whereas you gotta play the long-term game and always be looking for, anything that might change or what's coming next. Because, once you actually put a stake in the ground and people know who you are, they're going to come with you no matter where you go.
Yeah, I can totally agree with all of that. So I want to give space. Is there any other questions? Feel free to unmute or feel free to put them in the chat too. I have plenty of questions. I want to make sure that we're respectful of time too.
I don't have any questions, but I do want to just say thank you, Matt and Malcolm. What a wonderful presentation, so informative. And Malcolm, I have to say 2 things that really stuck out to me from the presentation was the one point that you said, realize that a brand takes time. And I have to say, especially for those that are starting, you see that a lot where they get started one day and they think the next day, they're going to have a huge following or they're going to have this major brand recognition. So I just find that to be an important point. And then I have to say, I really love the point, pick a platform and master it. You see that, especially with beginners, they get spread too thin. And that's really the important point that you made. It reminds me of the 80-20 rule in terms of optimality. And I really do think that's how you optimize when it comes to, brand management, recognition, and social media.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really appreciate the kind words. And I think you hit it right on the head. And it's, like you said, it takes time. And a lot of people, I said before, like you're going to see people quit. A lot of people quit. A lot of people, creating content is a full-time job. Like it's a lot of work and it can be draining over time. But I think if you're willing to put in the work over the years, and consistency, value, and patience, like that matters more than anything else. And just, understanding that, if you want it, it's worth it, but it takes that time. Yeah, you're right. So thank you.
Most definitely. Thank you both again. Really appreciate it.
I love that. It's all really awesome. Thanks, Shade, for sharing all of that. Is there any other comments, questions? Otherwise, I have one question I'd love to ask on that piece. I want to make sure we have everyone's questions though. All right, so I guess my one last question for you, Malcolm, I think, for a lot of athletes that might be watching the recording of this, I think it's on a lot of people's minds, like the new NIL rules and like with all that, from your end of things, like how does that potentially change the game, especially, at a place like Yale where it's not, there's only a very small few that get to go professional. Like how does NIL especially like kind of change it for maybe small schools, if it does at all? And like, how would you change maybe or how would your transition being from, being from like an active athlete to a retired athlete potentially change with the new like NIL rules? Like, does it change anything? I guess like I'd love to just get your thoughts, like how maybe the transition might be like different, especially with all the new rules around all of that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're only at the beginning of this thing. There's still a lot that needs to be kind of ironed out, and I think the opportunities when you look from even high major to NAIA schools, there's opportunities for every athlete, but it's really about taking a high level strategic approach to, you know, what your brand is, you know, how you're different from other athletes, what your you know end objectives are, and taking the time to really figure these things out before you know seek out endorsement deals or start creating Shopify sites, whatever the case may be. But I would say that one of the most or the greatest things about NIL is that you're no longer is your performance on the field really tied to the opportunities that you can have. You know, if an athlete, I think the Cavender twins are a great example, you know, from Fresno State, where they've probably been the most active NIL wise out of any athletes in their, I mean, mid-major Fresno State, this Division I, but it's not, you know, UCLA or Duke, you know. So I think that looking at what some of these lower level athletes have been able to do as far as the brands that they partner with, or how they're thinking about the strategic ways that they can monetize their platforms, whether that's podcasts or setting up a t-shirt store. You know, it's really about thinking outside the box and understanding what fits best for your platform. So I think the opportunities from top to down are there, but athletes just have to understand how to go about doing these things. It's a learning curve and there's a lot involved. And like I said, we're at the beginning of this, but if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to take the time to build out a strategy for your brand and understand, you know, what you're interested in, what your passions are, how you can tie these different things together, where your skill sets lie, it doesn't matter what school you play at, because the opportunities will be there. And that's now and going into the future. And that's the beauty about this whole thing to me. It's not really about, you know, being on ESPN or having, being a 5-star recruit out of high school. It's about, can you command attention or even have a niche following in the marketplace to where people want to buy something for you, or brands want to partner with you because you have a certain footprint on a certain audience. So understanding that is the most important thing. And I think when it comes to transitioning, the same thing applies. Like this is business at the end of the day. America it's meritocracy, it's capitalism. So if you're able to put yourself, you know, if you have a unique skill set, if you're talented at something and you're able to monetize it, like that can be your next career. You're learning actual business skills that are going to be important for you going forward in your future and life after sports. I think that's another great thing about NIL is like we're teaching student athletes to now have to deal with taxes, have to deal with business, starting business entities, contractual obligations, all these different things that this is the real world. And at the end of the day, they're kids, they're going to make mistakes, but we've all been there before. So it's, going back to the athletic departments, what resources and programming are we putting in place so that these athletes can be successful now, but also in the future? And so I think there's so much going on. There's a lot of, different news flying, and athletes, already are making mistakes, but I think that's a part of the process and a part of, how we get through this whole thing and how NIL becomes beneficial for all stakeholders involved.
Yeah, no, I'm super fascinated by it. And I love that you mentioned like the niche piece of it, because I think that's what I think, especially if you're getting started in entrepreneurship or building a business, like you always forget, like you always want to shoot for the moon. Like there's a really big impact you can have just by like crushing a niche, or at least like,
Right.
Really aiming for it. So
Yep.
love that you mentioned that. And with that, is there anything else you want to share, like your website, books, like, anything that you want to plug before we close this up?
Well, you can get my book Impact Beyond the Game on Amazon, and if anybody wants to reach out or has any other questions, you can shoot me an email at info@malcolmlimits.com. I'm always responsive and down to talk with anybody. So
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. And then it seems like we got one last question that came in the chat really quickly here. What are your thoughts on Kanye West opening down to school and recruiting school students out of high school?
Look, I think Kanye is one of the greatest brand builders and marketers of our generation. I think he's a genius, and he's, I mean, he does a lot of wild things. I'm not, I don't know too much about the academy or the school, but I think, you know, when you have a platform as big as he does, you can almost do anything that you want, and it's going to generate attention and awareness. And I think that's partially what this is about. And so we'll see what happens. I don't think it might fizzle out like LeVar Ball's JBL league or whatever the league was. It might not last too long, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, maybe it's another Bishop Sycamore too.
Right.
Love that. Well, what a way to end. I guess I'll stick around, Malcolm. I don't know if you have a couple more minutes if anyone wants to stick around. But yeah, otherwise, thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate it. We'll have this recording out at some point here in the next couple of weeks. And again, thanks for coming. And yeah, I guess I'll stick around for a couple of minutes if anyone wants to just do more personalized chat. Have a good night, everyone.